once in a while, a question comes up regarding what movies do you think would happen in the future? What could exist and what couldn't? One of those movies that for a long time seemed like a pipe dream was Gladiator II. It seemed like one of those ideas that was just going to be a long shot, because the first one ends in such a conclusive way that doing a follow-up to it seems kind of impossible. Lo and behold, however, 24 years after the release of that movie, we are getting a sequel in theaters very soon, this time following an adult Lucius Verus, played by Paul Mescal, who years after the events of that first movie and the death of Maximus, has himself become a gladiator and entered the arena after certain things have happened to him recently in his life, and he is hoping to exact revenge on those who have wronged him in the process. At the same time, Rome is going through a tumultuous period as twin emperors Geta and Caracalla have taken over, and the dream that Marcus Aurelius had for Rome hasn't been realized yet. And so the movie builds off on certain story elements that were in the first movie, while also continuing certain arcs forward and seeing them to their conclusions. Like I said, this is something that seemed like a pipe dream, this idea of a second Gladiator movie. But when it was announced, I feel like I speak for many when I say there was this sense of cautious optimism. Because while there was excitement about seeing another story in this series, it was also something that felt like it could be really bad if they mess it up, because that first movie is incredibly beloved. There are fans of that who, they hold it among some of their favorite movies of all time. Honestly, including myself. I absolutely love what that first movie did, and so when I went into the screening earlier, I was a bit concerned. But I'm here to tell you that those concerns were put to rest because I really enjoyed Gladiator II. I think it's a very solid follow-up to the first movie, and I think it does a very good job of bringing things together. I don't think it's as perfect as the first movie is, but at the same time, I was very satisfied overall with what they were able to do. And Ridley Scott, who at 87 years old, my God, this man is making some incredible work right now. This is such a massive movie in scale, some points even bigger than the first one was, particularly when it comes to a few sequences, like this massive ship battle that happens early on in the movie. I thought that was remarkably done and visually quite spectacular. There are sequences like that throughout the film where the action is really well executed. Lots of bodies, lots of killing, and it absolutely earns a lot of that. Something about this movie, though, which I should mention, is that Ridley Scott does not care about historical accuracy when it comes to a few things, as long as it's cool. For example, in this movie, there's a battle happening in the Colosseum, which is the simulated ship battle, and the whole place is filled with water. That is historically accurate. They did do that. What's not historically accurate is that there are sharks in the water. And so when people are getting killed, they're either dying by, spears and swords, or they're dying by shark. And you can't help but, admire the fact that as ridiculous as that is, he just goes for it. I almost respect the audacity when it comes to certain things like that, to just make the movie that has to be made as long as you're having fun. Historical accuracy? Probably not. But it's hard to sort of get mad at that, be like, yeah man, sharks in the water, how am I not supposed to think that's cool? Like, it's just one of those things, right? It's like launching a cannon at the pyramids in Napoleon. It's one of those shots that you're just immediately like, well, I don't think that happened, but at the same time, that looked awesome. So, I guess, movies. And there's a bunch of great performances at the middle of it as well, like Paul Mescal, who I think is really good as Lucius, and someone who kind of develops as the movie goes on in a way that he kind of wins you over by the end. When you first start off with this character, it takes a little bit to get, on the same wavelength as he's operating. But I think as, it's approaching the conclusion, he completely won me over, and I thought he did a good job. Pedro Pascal as General Acacius, I thought he did a really good job too. I would have liked a little bit more of him, I would say, but I think he was very solid for what the movie gave him. And I liked Connie Nielsen once again as well as Lucilla. I think she has a bigger role over here, and she manages to do a better job than I would say even in the first movie. The twin emperors, Geta and Caracalla, played by Joseph Quinn and Fred Heckinger, I think they're very over the top and and bizarre in the ways that the movie presents them, because they are described to be these bratty, spoiled kids who are trying to run an empire and doing a miserable job of it, but not, taking into account what people are going through. And as far as they're concerned, if they're amused, it's great. And they play those roles as you would expect them to be. But the real gem of this movie is Denzel Washington as Macronus. I would say that as far as the performances go, everything that I've just said about how good everybody else is, Denzel Washington acts circles around everyone, which should surprise zero people because it's Denzel Washington. He's one of the greatest of all time for a reason, and in this movie he absolutely proves that once again. Thankfully, he's also in a lot of the movie, so you get a lot of time to really explore his character and see what all he can do. And he has a ton of fun with this script, which is over the top but also serious at the same time. And he manages to wrestle with those two tones in a way that it really does work. I wouldn't be surprised if this is something that gets considered for awards at the same point, because I think he absolutely deserves to be in those conversations. He's so good over here, and I couldn't wait to see more of him every single time. He essentially plays Oliver Reed's character from the first movie. He is also someone who buys slaves and turns them into gladiators and takes them into the arena. But eventually his role is a lot bigger, as he's also wanting to make some power moves regarding what else he could do in terms of societal structures. And so he ends up having a more pivotal role in the process. Which leads into the narrative of the movie overall, which is fairly simple, much like the first movies. There are things going on in the background very similar to that one, but as far as character motivations and arcs go, it's a very simple point A to point B process. It's only later on, as things develop in the more like the second half of the movie, that a lot more stuff starts to happen and things become a little more complex. But for the most part, there are a lot of similar beats that are being followed to what the first movie did. Call it like the Force Awakens thing, if you will, because there are aspects of that movie too, where it took things from the original Star Wars and did its own thing with them. Similarly, over here, there are things that are going on with Lucius that tie into what was going on with Maximus, and so there are those parallels that are established in the process, which is not something I have a big issue with. I think that, at the end of the day, if it's one of those things, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think that storyline worked really well for Maximus, and I think for the most part it works here very well for Lucius as well. It doesn't go exactly the same way though. The movie does know it has to make changes, and it does make those changes when it needs to. And eventually, as things are heading towards its conclusion, it's a very different sort of circumstance that is created for these characters. Though I will say the one issue that is with this particular story compared to the previous movie is the emotional weight of it. I would say that's something that is not as strong as the first Gladiator. Like, you can watch that first movie, and as you're approaching the end, you can't help but have a few tears in your eyes over everything that's happening. I wouldn't say that's the same case with Gladiator II. There are moments where there are emotional beats hinted at, and there are times where it almost manages to, hit those exactly, that nail on the head, if you will. But it doesn't quite go there, because sometimes those happen in the middle of everything else. Like, there's one moment in particular where you're about to have a very emotional response to something, but it's happening in the middle of 10 other things that it sort of is like, okay, we gotta handle the other stuff right now. We'll get back here. It's like, wait, hold on. That was a very big thing that just happened over there. And so that can sometimes interfere a little bit with those moments of emotional catharsis. And I think some of the characterization that's going on in the background could have been a lot stronger. Like I mentioned, Acacius, Pedro Pascal could have had a bit more time. You don't get a ton with the twin emperors beyond they're just going crazy and doing what they want to do because they want to do it. And so I could have used a little bit more over there. There's some connections that are made to the first movie. Some of them work, a couple of them were not really needed. Like, there's a couple of things that some characters say, like, oh, I was there that time. It's like, okay. But that didn't really affect the movie for me overall. At the end of the day, when I walked out of Gladiator II, I was still very, very happy with the movie, and I had a really good time with it, and I would recommend checking it out. And again, this is coming from someone who was skeptical about it. I loved that first movie a lot, and the fact that this movie manages to be as fun and entertaining as it is is a testament to the fact that, Ridley Scott knows what he's doing. I would say this is one of his better movies in about a decade. I would say the last Duel that he made a few years ago, I think is a hair above this. I think that one was really, really great. But I was very happy with Gladiator 2. And I'm going to give it the third time this weekend, this rating, an 8.5 out of 10. So that's Heretic, Juror number 2, and now Gladiator 2 with 8.5s. It's a good weekend. What can I say? I had a really good time. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Look forward to more videos very soon. Hope you guys get to check out Gladiator 2 soon as well. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the movies.